next session, Electrifying Michigan, Navigating the EV Journey for Educators, Industry, and Consumers, presented by Washtenaw Community College.
All right. Thank you to our panelists for joining today. And thank you to our audience. I'm Alisyn Malek. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Middle Third. And today with me on the panel, we have Dr. Rose Bellanca, president and chief executive officer of Washtenaw Community College, Tom Butman, vice president of Butman Ford Dealerships, Neal Foley, director of marketing and electrification at DTE Energy, and Glenn Stevens, executive director of MichAuto. So to kick us off today, I'm going to ask a question for the entire panel to get each of your thoughts. We'll start with Rose. In your view, what is Michigan's unique role in the electric vehicle and hybrid revolution? And how can we position the state as a global leader in the field?
Thank you. Well, as you know, we're the Motor City, right? So that is our unique role. We have a commitment, we have a title, we have to keep moving forward and pressing forward. So which means that we have to be the most prepared. And to do that, I believe the catalyst in maintaining that is talent and education, and providing that right education and continuing to develop it, working along with industry, with government, and with students and all the sectors. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. And I'd like we'll just move down the road.
Great, sure. So I would say the exact same thing, history. So the history that we have in Michigan as a whole, when it comes to design and innovation, is what we need to look back on and utilize for the future. We have a lot of young people in our society that maybe don't know what Michigan has been able to accomplish as a state. And it not only is in the automotive sector, but it's even in, say design like furniture design. Herman Miller is a great example. And that company continues to innovate when it comes to different sectors that actually coincide with automotive. But really that's what we need to do, is help kids, young people, to know why it's so important that they keep that tradition alive and just give them that knowledge. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think you said it best, we're in the Motor City, right? And so I think that the leaders in this space are going to be those that can form partnerships, constructive partnerships, and those that can innovate. And I think we have a unique opportunity here because of our proximity to the auto industry, proximity to world-class educational institutions, a supportive state. And so we have a very unique opportunity here to form these partnerships and innovate, and that doesn't exist everywhere. And I think for Michigan and Detroit to lead, we need to take advantage of this sort of unique mix we have here today.
I'll just pick up on that because I think the unique role is off of the unique ecosystem that we have. Alisyn, we keep track of the data, but there's 26 OEMs, 96 of the top 100 suppliers in North America, 3 R1 universities, maybe another one coming. We have an unparalleled density of research and development anywhere in the globe, and that gives you a platform to provide that really unique role, and all the things that I just heard are part of that.
Excellent, thank you. So now we're going to start with you, Glenn, and work back down the row talking about this transition. So we know that the transition to electric hasn't exactly been smooth. I once heard someone say that we're sort of at the first turn of the lap in a marathon. So what do you see as the biggest challenges and most exciting opportunities we face and will face as we look at this transition to electrification? I'll start with Glenn and we'll go back down the row.
Well, I don't think the challenges are ones that we haven't heard, but I do think that the price of the vehicles is something that is going to continue to come down to make it more accessible. The infrastructure, we're behind on the infrastructure. I know we're going to talk more about that, but I really think the biggest thing is mindset and culture. Are we going to be a culture that embraces new technology and wants to be a leader in EVs? Or are we going to be one that says, that's a fad or a phase? Well, it's not a fad or a phase. This is happening globally and we need to be part of it. But consumers need to be educated and people need to be educated about it. So I think that's what we're faced with right now.
Yeah, and I think I'll pick up on that infrastructure point again. When we look at what we expect in terms of EV adoption here, just in our service territory in southeast Michigan, we're expecting something like 300,000 vehicles just in the next 4 years. So this isn't long term. And those 300,000 vehicles are going to need something like 240,000 incremental chargers. And that kind of equates to something close to $2 billion of investment. So there's this huge investment challenge. And where do those dollars come from? Some of them get taken by the consumer who's adopting the EV or the fleet that's transitioning to electric vehicles. But there's also a huge investment needed into public charging, on-route charging, things like that. And where that investment comes from is a challenge we're going to have to tackle together. So I kind of see that need for investment being again, a challenge we have to overcome.
Just to go back to kind of mindset and the people that are adopting this, it's not just the consumers. So that's what we have to remember, is that in my position at the dealer level, a lot of it has to coincide with what WCC is doing, is training the next generation of technicians, the next generation of advisors, the people that love automobiles and want to see them stay on the road, because that is something that is changing so quickly. And we have this turnover, and we have actually a lack of technicians right now. And so you have these seasoned technicians that don't really want to learn that much about EVs. They've already gone through a lot of changes with automobiles when it comes to connectivity, when it comes to them already being essentially rolling computers. So this next generation is going to be so important to adopt and want to fix these cars. So that's what I think is the biggest hurdle, but also opportunity for the next generation, is that those people that do come in and say, hey, I've had this training at, say, WCC or Ann Arbor Public Schools or any of these different institutions, them saying, oh, I do have an opportunity to differentiate myself and be successful.
Thank you. Well, I agree with my colleagues. Backing it up just a little bit, I think the biggest obstacle is fear. Fear. I heard a consumer saying yesterday when at work, I would never get an electric vehicle because I have to drive 200 miles. What if? And not understanding how it actually works and what's available. So I say fear. And as far as awareness, I think awareness. So we may be able to provide the training, and it's so good to see students here. We can provide training, but if students at the high school level or whatever, if they're not aware of how the auto is changing, how the industry changes, if you're not aware, you have no idea where to plug into this. So you might be willing to learn, but we have to make sure that we keep your advisors involved. Your counselors need to understand it. Have training for your teachers. Your parents need to learn more about it to see that this is a changing industry and it's so rich with opportunity. So in addition to what you've said, I do think it's fear of change, fear of the unknown, and working on the awareness.
I just wanted to add one thing. I talked about the consumers. We can't have our political leaders be obstacles. Yes, the consumers and the markets are going to make the decisions, and people should have that. But when we have political leaders out being anti-EV or anti-technology or anti-progress, that's not going to do us any good. I heard Mayor Duggan yesterday speak about how we're going to have new chargers in Detroit in the next year. He made a big commitment yesterday, and I was really enthused by what I heard from him. So they have to be enabling, but not an obstacle.
I think you've all made really good points, and I think even just seeing what this show and the announcements from the city and what this show is allowing people to see. I was actually up on the show floor this weekend with my family, seeing so many people get exposure to try driving EVs, to learn, seeing the DTE display. It's really exciting to see the evolution to be able to give more of that exposure and hopefully chip away at some of that fear. So now we're going to move into some deep dive questions, and I realize I didn't say at the top, I have some prepared questions. We'll continue through those. We're saving the last 10 minutes for questions from the audience. So as you hear us talk, if you think of something that you want to make sure you ask, we've got about 20 more minutes, and then I'll let you guys know when your opportunity comes up to head up to the microphone. So my first question is for Rose. How is, in particular, WCC equipping students with these skills necessary for the rapidly evolving EV and hybrid workforce? You talked a little bit, we need to make sure people are aware. What is WCC doing? Are there specific programs or credentials that stand out as essential for bridging the talent gap?
Absolutely, thank you. Well, Washtenaw Community College has chosen this area as a strength, a priority for our college. And we made that commitment in 2014. And so once we made that commitment, we decided in order to be the best, we would need to work with industry. And at that moment is what we could continue to do. We develop our curriculum from the outside in. So everything we do is with our industry partners, like Tom here, and developing curriculum on advisory boards. And our faculty have completely redone their curriculum. I admire them so much. So they have been trained and retrained all along. And once you make a commitment, we made a commitment to the government in 2017 in order to accept millions of dollars in order to revamp our program. You make a commitment, and our board made a commitment, that means you're in it for the long haul. And to be in the long haul, you have to have state-of-the-art curriculum and programs. So right now, what we are doing is we have two certificates in particular relating to EV, which are EV safety fundamentals and EV service tech. Now, I know I have students here. We also train incumbent workforce, people in the workforce as well as companies to retrain individuals. So while you're doing this, there might be a company that also is looking to us saying, can you help us retrain our individuals? Or, I don't know, maybe we even work with dealerships to retrain some of your individuals in these areas. We also work, as I mentioned before, very closely with other corporations, like in the area of semiconductors. We're part of the MSTAR program with KLA and with IMEC and with the University of Michigan and with General Motors. And as you know, a semiconductor is a very critical component. You need much more of them in the development of electric vehicles and batteries. So we are involved in there. We have applied associate's degrees. So if you want to, in transportation technology, it's a degree in applied sciences. So there's no dead end when you come to Washtenaw Community College, because you can come and you can have a certificate, go to work. Your employer, they're going to steal you right from our program. So you go out to work, and what happens is, you're out there working and you think, gee, I want to go back. You come back to WCC. We have the next certificate for you to take right in that course. Or you might decide then, gee, I want that associate's degree. Come right on back. Or you might decide, gee, I think I want to be an engineer. Okay, well, guess what? We have a partnership with the university. So the whole pathway is what we do to prepare individuals for the workforce. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't I get so excited.
That's good, that's good.
I'm sorry.
That was a lot of really important information, especially for everybody in the audience, so thank you. One kind of deep dive on that I wanted to ask is, how do we ensure that opportunities within the EV space are available to all segments of the population? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and that's where we always pay attention to that, and that's where actually partnering with government is so important, and state agencies like the MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, or grants like we have with D3C3, working with the chamber, with with our advanced Ypsi grant, where we're going right into Ypsilanti High School and working with students in Ypsilanti High School and their parents, so the high school youth as well as their parents in the mobility field. So, and working with K-12, if you look at the K-12, there you're definitely going to talk about every single segment in the community. Those are just some of the ways.
Thank you so much. And to my panelists who know the order of the questions, I'm actually going to switch it up a little bit. So Neal, please be patient with me, but I'm coming for you. Tom, can you talk a little bit? You hinted at some of the challenges that dealerships face with training current employees. Can you talk a little bit about, in a little bit more detail about those challenges, especially focused on EV and hybrid sales and service, and maybe give some examples of how your relationship with WCC has helped to address some of those challenges?
Absolutely. So just kind of what I touched on earlier is just the generational change right now when it comes to not only technicians, but also advisors, sales advisors, service advisors. So our biggest challenge right now is adoption of mindset, is adoption of being able to go from being a salesperson or going from being kind of more of the traditional technician to becoming a sales advisor, and helping people to understand the technology better, but also transitioning our technicians to becoming essentially computer engineers. I mean, a lot of what we have going on now, just to say how WCC helps us, is that we have people coming out of WCC that are well trained in computer systems and how they interact with traditional automotive powertrains right now. The next generation of what's just starting within the curriculum, obviously we talk about the EV curriculum, is now they're going to have that transitional knowledge, because at WCC they're not only going to go for that EV certificate, they're also going to be going for more traditional. And so that's one of the biggest challenges right now, is having technicians that are able to adapt to any situation. So I keep going back to them. Obviously salespeople, advisors are very important, but technicians have always been something that have had to be advanced, have had to be students of the industry, because they not only have to work on mechanical issues, they also have to work on HVAC issues.
Yes,
they also have to work on electrical issues.
Right.
And now they're turning into electricians, like more of electricians, more of computer scientists. So that's one of the biggest things that we try to really help them to get the training. Ford Motor Company's helped us out a lot with the training. I touched on ACE program earlier, which we partner with Ann Arbor Public Schools, Washtenaw Community College, Southwest Washtenaw Consortium, as well as Ypsilanti Community Schools. And so those partnerships are going to be one of the biggest accelerators for the industry when it comes to the next generation. So that's where I think that our biggest kind of focus is currently.
Thank you. And now we're going to have to be careful. You said some of your technicians are practically becoming electricians. We just need to make sure that DTE doesn't scoop all of them up. So Neal, this one's for you.
Sure.
As EV adoption accelerates, what role does infrastructure play in consumer readiness? And how is DTE preparing for the scale up of charging networks and grid capacity?
Yeah, sure. I think, infrastructure is foundational, right? Customers that are thinking about adopting an EV have to be comfortable and confident that that infrastructure is there, so they can abandon the gas station that they're familiar with. They know where it is, they know the price of gas, and move to this new world. And so they have to be confident that that infrastructure is there to give them that ability to transition. When I think about what we're doing here at DTE, I'll break it into kind of two different buckets. The first is preparing our grid, our infrastructure for the increase in electric vehicles. That's one. And then the second is thinking through how do we incentivize the efficient use of that infrastructure and our grid to sort of keep costs down for all consumers. And so on the first, as we think about how are we preparing our grid, we undertake very detailed forecasting. We look at public sources, we look at our own internal models to get a really good forecast of what do we think the electric vehicle adoption will be in our service territory, and where do we think it'll be. We then use that to feed into our capital planning and our investment plans to say, hey, we think we're going to need, for example, 240,000 new chargers over the next 5 years. Those require new connections, they need to be energized, we have to have the capacity. So what are those investments we're going to have to make to get out in front of those chargers coming online? And so that gets refreshed and updated with a very regular cadence to make sure we're prepared. So that's kind of the first bucket. The second, though, is maybe a little more exciting, which is how do we start to incentivize the efficient use of those assets? And what I mean by that, if you picture a very simple example, if you have two electric vehicles, and if they're charging at the same time, we have to build infrastructure for two EVs so that we can support both that are charging. If we can get those EVs to charge at different times, well, then we only have to build the infrastructure to charge one EV, EVA will do it first, and then EVB will come next. So that behavior, we can incentivize in a few different ways. The most passive way are time of use rates, for example, where we charge a little bit higher rate when our grid is congested and a little bit lower rate when there's some excess capacity. And then we hope people respond to that by shifting their charging to those uncongested times. We're also piloting managed charging, so where we, as DTE, get some level of control over when an EV charges, and then kind of pay those customers and compensate those customers for our ability to kind of shift their charging around. And then to even take it to a more further extreme, one of the things we're just starting to pilot and get into is not only how do we get EVs to sort of use our infrastructure efficiently, but how can we use electric vehicles to actually help our grid and relieve congestion where it exists. And then we start getting into vehicle-to-grid capabilities, and how do we manage that in a safe way? How do we aggregate load? How do we direct electric vehicles, batteries to use on our grid in the right place, and kind of how do we compensate owners for that privilege? So again, we're doing all these things at the same time, and we're doing it at the right time now, and we're still somewhat early, and adoption is still relatively low, and this will really prepare us for sort of the influx of EVs we're expecting.
I love the idea of bidirectional charging. It's just so awesome to think about how your car can also power your house, and just kind of the freedom that gives an individual is really, really cool.
Yep, agreed.
The future is here. So we've talked a little bit about the skills that we need. We've talked a little bit about the infrastructure we need. Let's talk about the supply chain that we need. So Glenn, what does Michigan's EV and hybrid supply chain look like today, and what are the most significant gaps or opportunities for growth, especially, like you said, as the price of the final vehicle